Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel today. So in today's tutorial, we'll be quickly going about the sewing of this beautiful detailed bustier gown, which has a stylish keyhole neckline with a slight sweet heart and an exaggerated or balloon sleeve. So it's 100% beginners friendly, and if this sounds like something interested in learning, please continue watching. Without much ado, let's get started with today's tutorial. The detailed drafting and cutting of this particular tutorial has been already dropped on the channel. The link is right there on the description box, so it's really safe for you to go watch it out because it's detailed and beginners friendly, so that you can understand every step we'll be taking in the second part, which is today's tutorial, that will be all about the sewing. Okay, so if you have gone ahead to watch out this first part, you can go on ahead. It's totally free and safe to continue with the second part of the tutorial. So after all the drafting and cutting, I also went ahead to transfer all of my pieces on my pattern paper to my fabric, and that was all I did, and this is all we have so far. So I also added all my allowance to the parts that are needed, and this is exactly the point where we stopped at the first part of the tutorial, which is the drafting part. I also cut out on my lining piece and my hairstay as well, and I ironed everything so far. So when I was now done showing all of that, I went ahead to now iron out all these my pieces. For the front part of my blouse, I went ahead to iron my hairstay to my fabric and my lining piece. Then I also went ahead to pad the main fabric of the piece I'm working with right here, as you can see. So I used the wadding and also a foam for the two sides because my wadding wasn't enough. All right, so this is it, and I'm just going to cut off this excess hairstay that is popping out at the edges of this my fabric. Remember, I ironed my hairstay to my fabric and also to my lining piece. So I'm just going to trim off the excess hairstay I have popping out at the edges as earlier mentioned. Then I'll go ahead and commence with the joining. So I hope you know all the parts where I added all my sewing allowance. That is the essence of you watching out the first part of the tutorial if you are yet to see that, so that you don't get confused on everything I'll be doing right here in today's tutorial. So I'll make sure I trim off all of this which is not nice and pleasing to the sight at all. Then I'm now going to arrange this front part of my blouse. So I'll get the middle, which is the center front, and the two side fronts facing the camera right side of the fabric. Now I'm going to start joining at those curved parts by making sure that the side front and the center front at that curved part aligns at the base. Please, while you are cutting out as well, don't forget to notch your underbust points. Okay, so like that from the base, right sides facing each other. I'm just simply going to go ahead to start pinning this, as you can see I'm doing right here. I hope it's very clear and not confusing at all. So after pinning, I'm now going to mark 1 inch, half of an inch as my stitching allowance. Remember, I already showed you all of that when I was done transferring all the pieces of my pattern paper to my fabric. So you can see I'm following the way and the shape of this part to mark that half of an inch which I'll be stitching in. So after marking this half of an inch, please just go ahead and now stitch exactly the way you've marked. Okay, so I'll repeat the same stuff for the both sides of the side front and do the same thing for my lining piece. But remember, we are not padding our lining piece. Okay, so here now is for the yoke. So I went ahead now to remove the pins and the pattern paper for my yoke. Like I stated earlier, I also have my lining piece for my yoke. This is the right side of my fabric, and I'm just going to place my lining like this on top of the right side of my fabric on my yoke. So now I'm going to stitch this triangular part after pinning this all around to ensure that my lining and my fabric stays together so that it doesn't shift at all. Okay, so I'm going to stitch the neckline and also the triangle part. So the neckline is this part that is long, that is slanty or slanted. So that's the part I will stitch using half of an inch, and also do the same thing for the triangular part. Remember, I also left stitching allowance all around this yoke part as well. Stitch like this, and then the neckline. So whatever you're doing for one piece, you're doing for the other piece as well. Okay, So move over to the back part now. Also remove my pattern paper and the pins I have on my fabric. So I'm going to also flip this to the right side. So I also have my lining piece cut out as well. Right side facing the camera, I'm going to place my lining on top of the right side of my back piece, and I'm just going to stitch all around. I'll stitch the neckline using 1/4 inch, the zipper allowance area, the base and the sides. I'm not stitching the shoulder and the armhole yet. So for the lower part, which is also the skirt part, I'm also going to spread this out. This is like my main fabric. I'll spread it out this way, and I'll also use my lining piece to cover the right side of my fabric and make sure I arrange it very well on top of it. So firstly, you're going to push down your lining to the length of your fabric or your skirt. Then you're going to go ahead and pin it just as I'm doing right here, and you go ahead after pinning and now stitch it down using 1/2 inch. When you now stitch it down, you now drag up your lining piece upward because you have that space, so you have to drag it up. By the time you drag this up, you see how the base is going to come out. So that is actually how it's going to be. You can see what I have. So stitch all the sides and leave about 5 inches at one side where you turn it out from. So this is for the front part. I've joined the side front and center front. So my seam, I ironed it open. You can see how nice this is looking. So I ironed it open and flat. And the next thing I'm going to do now, so this thing I did for the main fabric for the front, I also did it for my lining piece as well. Okay, so I'm now going to start joining my yoke as well, because after stitching my yoke, just the neckline and the triangular part, I turned it out from the shoulder. Okay, and I made sure I went ahead to iron this. So on that triangular part, after stitching, please go ahead and give it a slight notch. Be careful not to cut through your threads. Okay, so give it a slight notch so that by the time you iron the triangle part, the effects can be popping out and relax just the same way mine is. So this is all I did, and this is the front part after ironing. Now I'm going to start pinning my yoke to the front part of my dress. So I'm going to start this now by pinning the center of that neckline for my yoke and that center of my center front, which is that part where the sweetheart neckline effect started from. So when I now pin it there, I'll make sure that the armhole of my yoke aligns with the armhole of the body part of my dress, just this way. And you know, I'm pinning them right sides, you see. So you see how I'm pinning the right side of my yoke, which is the fabric, on the right side of my front dress, which is also the fabric. Okay, so I don't know if my explanation is not so clear, but whatever I'm doing right here is very clear to every one of us here. Okay, so just go ahead and do exactly the same thing I'm doing this way. And by the time you do this, if you now flip this to the other side of your yoke, this is what it's going to look like. But at the end of the day, we still need our lining piece to cover this up. So I'm going to fold it back to rest on top of my fabric. Then I'll get my lining piece and I'm going to place them right sides facing each other and now pin this all around. So for the top part, which is this top part, I'll be stitching it together with my lining using 1/2 inch. So go ahead and also stitch your, what's that again, your hemming gum as you're stitching this together at the top part, so that by the time you want to iron the top part, it can align perfectly. Okay, so I stitched the top part using just 1/2 inch. Then I stitched the two sides together using 1/4 inch. Then I also stitched the base using just 1/4 inch, and I turned out everything from the armhole. So when you now turn it out, you see what it will look like. Okay, so for my skirt part, I've gone ahead to stitch all the sides, the waist and the base. So at one side there, at this side, you can see that that is where I left 5 inches where I turned out everything from. When I now stitched it in, and I now ironed it very well, as you can see right here. So I also stitched my dart as well, so please go ahead and do the same thing. All these things I did it for the front and the back part of this my skirt. So I'm going to start joining them at the sides, right sides facing each other. For the fabric, I'll start pinning one part of my back part to the front part at the sides and make sure that it aligns properly at the base, just the same way mine did right here. So you do it for the both sides. So remember that while we were drafting, the stitching allowance I gave this was 2 inches. So that is what I'll be using to stitch this at the sides by the time I'm done pinning. So whatever you're doing for this side will be also done for the other side of our basket. Okay, so stitch using just 2 inches at both sides of your skirt, and that'll be it. Now that I'm done with all of that, you can see what I have. So you see I stitched both sides in just 2 inches. You can see, because I needed enough allowance for this. So you can see how neat the inside is looking, and I measured it out for you all to see. That was my stitching allowance. So the next, I'm going to get the front part or the upper part of our gown. I'll just place this one aside. So I stitched out everything, you can see, and I turned out everything from the armhole of the body part. This is how nice this is looking. So I'm going to join this now with the back part of my blouse, which I joined earlier, if you can remember. So I'm going to get the back part and I place it right sides facing each other. So you can see I've also stitched in my dart for the back part of my gown. And then on the shoulder, I'm going to open it up this way, fabric to fabric and lining to lining. I'm just going to join the front and the back shoulder. So just watch closely what I'm doing right here. I believe it's not confusing at all. So after pinning fabric to fabric and lining to lining, go ahead and now stitch this straight. Okay, then when you are now done with that, you arrange the sides the same way we did for the front part. You now arrange the sides, then you also mark your stitching allowance of 2 inches. So that is the same thing we did for the skirt part. Okay, so you now stitch it down. So whatever I'm doing for this other side, I'll be doing it for the other side of my dress. Okay, so now that I'm done joining for the both sides, you can see for the upper part, you can see, and this is the lower part. The next thing is to join them together on the waist area. So now I'm going to get the skirt part and the upper part, and on the waist I'll start pinning from the zipper allowance I have. Ensure that your seam is open. Ensure that your seam is open. You can see how I'm actually doing mine so that my seam can be open. Then after this, go ahead and stitch it together using half of an inch. You have to fix your zipper and your balloon sleeve. I honestly lost that clip, and by the time I realized, I've already sent out this dress to my clients. Please, apologies for that. But if you just join on the waist, I'll be pinning some other tutorials on the full detail on how to go about the joining and the fixing of your zipper and your balloon sleeve, because I have all of that on my channel. So that was it, and it's really turned out so beautiful. It's really painful that you didn't get to see my creation, but it was exactly the same replica of what you saw at the beginning part of this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time on this same channel. Bye.